Welcome back. And joining me now is Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. Senator Schiff, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Great to be with you.
It's wonderful to have you here on a big Sunday. You just heard my interviews with Vice President J.D. Vance, with the Russian foreign minister. Senator, what do you make of where this peace process stands? Do you believe it is stalled, or do you think it's moving forward, albeit slowly?
I think it's stalled, and I was most interested in your question to him, was Russia essentially stringing along, was Putin stringing along the President of the United States? Now, Lavrov is such a practiced liar. He's been doing this for decades. He seemed to have trouble with that question. He didn't answer that question directly. I was also surprised, frankly, that Russia would go and bomb a U.S. electronics factory that's so in your face to the president, to President Trump, that seems unnecessarily provocative. But they're clearly stringing the president along. And, you know, I think at some we have to start, what's our national security interest? Our national security interest is seeing a strong, sovereign, independent, democratic Ukraine. And measured against that, this summit, I think, was a failure. It didn't advance our interests or Ukraine's interests or that of our allies. Putin walked away with essentially no ceasefire, despite the president's demand for it. He walked away after being on the stage on U.S. soil with U.S. President, literally the red carpet rolled out for him. He walked away out from under the threat of sanctions from the United States. Trump had promised to impose sanctions. So they strung him along successfully. And I think the president, for his part, was correct when he said Ukraine can't win a war if it can't go on offense. But it is the president and the administration that is preventing Ukraine from going on offense by preventing Ukraine from using weapons to attack Russia on Russian soil. So I think it was a real setback for us. Lavrov, no surprises in his statements, except perhaps in his inability to directly refute the idea that they're stringing along the president.
Well, something we'll obviously continue to watch really closely. I do want to ask you about one of the top domestic issues this week, the FBI search of former National Security Advisor and Ambassador John Bolton's home and office. I did have the opportunity to ask the Vice President about this. He rejects the idea that this is political retribution. Do you believe that people need to let this investigation play out and not get ahead of it at this point?
I think this is clearly retribution. I mean, the idea that they just picked John Bolton, a prominent critic of the president, at random. What the president is trying to do here is very systemic and systematic, and that is anyone who stands up to the president, anyone who criticizes the president, anyone who says anything adverse to the president's interests gets the full weight of the federal government brought down on them. So if you're John Bolton, you get your home seized. If you're on the Federal Reserve and you won't lower interest rates, you get threatened with prosecution or with firing. If you're a general, like the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and you issue a report, or the agency does, casting doubt on the success of U.S. military strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, you get fired. If you are the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and you give a jobs report that the president doesn't like, you get fired. They're essentially going after any critic, any opposition, in an effort to intimidate them. That's what this is about. It's not about Bolton per se. It's about anyone else that, like Bolton, might stand up to the president.
Well, you have been a critic of the president's, and the administration is targeting you of what they allege is mortgage fraud. I want to read a little bit of what President Trump posted on social media. He writes, quote, Adam Schiff has engaged in a sustained pattern of possible mortgage fraud. Adam Schiff said that his primary residence was in Maryland to get a cheaper mortgage and rip off America when he must live in California because he was a congressman from California. Now, the government mortgage company, Fannie Mae, says you're, quote, engaged in a sustained pattern of possible occupancy misrepresentation on several loans. Are these allegations true? How do you respond to them?
They're patently false, and the president knows it. In the housing agency, president's person, Pulte, knows it. He's essentially doing the president's bidding against me, against Letitia James, against this person on the Federal Reserve. Mortgage is their new weapon to go after their critics. But I've been very open about my residency, both in California and in Maryland, with my constituents and with the lenders. So there's no there there. But the common denominator is they will manufacture anything to go after their critics, after members of Congress to try to silence them, after John Bolton, after people in the Federal Reserve, after generals, after former presidents. They're investigating Comey and Clapper, the Obamas, the Clintons. Basically, it's free reign with a corrupt leadership at the Justice Department.
And just very quickly, will you cooperate with the investigation?
Oh, well, we have, and we've refuted their allegations. In fact, we put it in writing. But it doesn't matter. What matters to them is the intimidation campaign, and they're going to mount it against anyone who stands up to the president. But I'm not backing down, and I have to hope that others will stand up to this increasing authoritarian form of government.
Couple more in just a few minutes left. I want to talk to you about the Epstein files. The Justice Department this week releasing more than 300 pages of interview transcripts with Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, she's serving a 20-year sentence for her role in Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking. She said in the interview she never witnessed President Trump act inappropriately, and that Epstein actually did not have a client list that she's aware of. Did the release satisfy any of the outstanding questions that you have about this matter?
Oh, I don't think it'll satisfy anyone. They go and they do this interview without the presence of a prosecutor who actually knows the facts, because they fired her, James Comey's daughter. So they go in there, the #2 person in the Justice Department, not knowing any of the facts, not having a lawyer present to represent the victims of this child sex trafficking. Convicted sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell, goes into this interview undoubtedly told by her attorney, unless you completely exonerate the president, you're going to spend most of the rest of your life in prison. So she wants a pardon. She says exactly what her lawyers tell her is going to be necessary to get a pardon. No one should be surprised here. And she's immediately moved to a less secure prison, which is not for convicted child sex traffickers. It all stinks to high heaven. And there's a common denominator here, too, which is the president going after his enemies to distract from their failure to do the one thing they promised to the Justice Department, and that is release the Epstein files.
Very quickly, final question. This week, Texas Republicans redrew their map. They added 5 additional Republican seats. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, says it's time to fight fire with fire. He is moving to add 5 additional Democratic seats. You, Senator, have been very outspoken against tearing down Democratic norms. Does this tit-for-tat over redistricting run the risk of undercutting Democrats' credibility in the eyes of voters?
Democrats offered the legislation in the last session to eliminate the gerrymander in every state. We supported, I think, to a person. Republicans, I think, almost to a person, maybe to a person, opposed that. It's very clear what party wants to do away with gerrymandering. But it was interesting to me when you asked J.D. Vance, hey, if your agenda is so popular, why are you trying to gerrymander Texas, a state that is already gerrymandered to elect Republicans? And he didn't try to defend the president's agenda. The president is deeply unpopular, one of the most unpopular presidents in history. His agenda is unpopular. The big ugly bill that is cutting health care for millions to fund tax cuts for rich people is historically unpopular. So, of course, the only way they feel they can survive the midterms is by redrawing the lines in Texas. California is not going to stand for this. We will fight fire with fire. Don't poke the bear, and it's going to be necessary, but I hope what will come out of the end of all of this is where we should have begun, and that was with the Democratic bill to end the gerrymander in every state.
All right, we covered a lot of ground today. Senator Adam Schiff, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.